Once again, I want to thank the one and only Quant Papa for going the extra mile with the deep dive info. And on this one, you guys like visuals. Who doesn't? You want to see some things that are no longer speculative with confirmation. It's no longer the time to connect dots. We've been there. We've done that. Let's enjoy this moment together. Okay. This doesn't mean that you go out and do something crazy or you're going to see, the market pump like crazy for quant. It's nothing like that, guys. As the saying goes, deadlines for me, ISO 222 final deadline, November 2025. I understand that Quant's ISO TC 307, but it works with ISO 222. So enough of all that. Let's jump into this. I was so glad to get into this. It's one thing to talk about this stuff for a while, and it's another to finally be like, man, this is a feel-good moment. It's a real good feel-good moment. So, yes, let's pull this up. Let me clear out just a couple tabs here because I need to. Yeah, and here we go. Let's start off with this before we get into like the super juiciest of the juicy. And this comes straight from a LinkedIn page. I may be wondering why this. Got to give you a little bit more of that new news. So this was recent. This is from Andhara, not Harasan from JASMY. But yes, that is the country of Spain that you see here. Andhara wins Bank of Spain contract for what? Wholesale CBDC tokenized deposit trials, according to Ledger Insights for Blockchain Enterprise. There's a lot of participants, big names here, so on and so forth, right? And you see some people like this guy, Juan Jimenez Zabalos, who's part of FinTech and MTech VCs, policy and advocacy, I should say, for international experience. He's an executive advisor. And basically speaking, you have other people kind of, giving kudos. But why I'm showing this to you is lately, for the last, I don't know, a couple months or so, Quant Network's not really tweeting anything. And I don't know if that's because they just don't want influencers to post about it. I don't know. Maybe because of NDA clause or too many people leaking stuff out, connecting the dots, where you want to call it. They're not doing that. But where they're posting a ton of information is like what you see right here from LinkedIn. So I wanted to point that out. And the other thing I wanted to point out is this. Who's part of this whole thing, this big mix from Finality? Well, it's Andrew Carrier. Interesting. Wholesale CBDC, what was just mentioned here, and of course, Quant Network at the forefront. Now, on that one, there's no confirmation, but nonetheless, it was recent. I want to share it with you guys. Now, here's the good stuff. Here's the stuff to really start getting into, and then we'll show you a little bit more information. This right here, I thought was wow, a big wow moment. Because we talk about patents when it comes to JASMY, right? A lot of key players from JASMY who contribute to patents. Well, United States patent US 202.00311.718, letter A1. Inventor Gilbert Verdian. Okay. Worldwide applications, not Japan, United States, 2018. I hear you guys. I hear you. Can you give us something new? Absolutely. So back in 2018, November 28th to be exact, Quant filed application for this particular patent. And then in 2020, there was a publication. 7/12 of 2021 assigned to Quant Network Limited. And then all of a sudden, 12/12, yes, you read it right, highlighted 2023, as in, what is it today, guys? Today's the 10th. So, basically a little under a month ago, or a little over, almost a month ago, give or take. It says application granted. You see it on your screen. At least I think you do. Yes, you should see this on your screen. And application granted. And what is the status active? Absolutely, it's active. Very, very cool stuff. What is so cool about this? Max, you just pointed out an application for a particular, patent. Cool story. But what is it? Great question. Getting into this a little bit more, what is so significant about this is when you pull up the patents.google.com patent page, you will see that it has this information here. Blockchain communications and ordering. It's an abstract. It says this, or I should say, the present disclosure provides a computer implemented method for maintaining a record of an order of messages appearing on one or more of blockchains. The method comprising identifying a plurality of messages, wherein each of these messages in the plurality of transactions is included on any of the one or more blockchains, and storing a record of the plurality of messages in a data store, wherein the record is indicative of the relative order of the plurality of transactions. And of course, have a big, huge breakdown here. It's got a classification. Talks about payment architecture, schemes, or protocols characterized by the use of specific devices or networks using electronic wallets or electronic money safes involving electronic purses, or money safes involving authentications. Gives you kind of like more of a breakdown. But anyway, if you go to the far right side of the page, I don't know if this is big enough for you guys, so maybe I'll come out of the frame. Yeah, I'll just do that for a second. Far right side of the page mentions this right here. It's kind of like a little bit more of what we talked about, the worldwide applications, the current assignee, Quant Network, inventor Gilbert Verdi, and some of these other guys. Paulo Tasca, I think he was also a guy that was formerly part of Ripple, and then he joined up with Quant. So there's a little bit more about that, status active. The technical field, the disclosure relates to methods, systems. Here, I'll highlight it for you. I don't know if I can blow it up a little bit bigger. I could blow it up a little bit bigger, but it might get smudged. Hold on a second. Yeah, 175 is too big. So technical field, this disclosure relates to methods. Let me take out that little branding thing for you guys. It says methods. And basically speaking, systems, computer programs, SDKs for maintaining a record of an order or transactions appearing on one or more blockchains. It also relates to methods, systems, all those things we mentioned. There's some other key things I want to get into. And of course, references the Bitcoin white paper. All right. Who's not going to reference that at this point? Going to get back to this part on the right side. Apologize. Talks about, these claims and so on. Don't want to get into all that. But yeah, it says in summary, a first aspect of the present disclosure, there is provided a computer implemented method for maintaining a record of an order of transactions appearing on one or more blockchains. Yeah, keep in mind, the Overledger. I mean, it basically spells Overledger. Maintaining a record of an order of transactions, security, stability, vulnerabilities, improving the security and stability of systems, utilizing the one or more blockchains, by being blockchain agnostic. Going further down, 1 second. Storing the record of plurality on the transactions of the data store compromises. Each time transaction is identified a new block, storing a record of this. Talks about the data store. But anyway, my point is, I want to get into a little bit more of why we should point this out, in my opinion. So I would like to actually just share this on the other side of the screen. It's a PDF, actually. Give me a second to come out of the frame. So I present this where you're going to see probably my whole screen for a second. Yeah, give me just a second. All right, there's an infinite amount of windows, but I want you to see this. I know you can see this now. So this is the actual patent, and this is the full details. Talks about all these publications, where it all started, and so on. It gives you a breakdown, really, of how it all works, how it all comes together. I don't want to get into all the nerd talk, but there's so much that's basically cited here. And here's the one for December 12, 2023. It's got an application functional layer. It gives like a whole definition of what Overledger actually does. And in the past, the point was, showing you guys like demos of it and so on. How would you like to actually have something which like talks about what it physically does? So it talks about first DLT, second DLT, the DLT layer, how Overledger is part of this whole thing. I'm not going to get into all this because it's just too much to really get into. So I'm gonna scroll further down, but there's some key things that I saw on here. I'm sure at some point maybe Tokenizer or somebody like that will really break some of this stuff down. I'm not guaranteed. I don't speak on his behalf, but I'm gonna take it down to this part, and it's some of the stuff in regards to the summary of where it specifically mentions, basically like, well, I mean, it mentions Ethereum, Ripple, and some of these other ones. But what I do like is you see a little bit more of what was posted about the Overledger in regards to this patent. I'm just trying to scroll down to the part. On this particular one, you can't just do a Control F, unfortunately. I really tried it before. So you're going to have to bear with me on a little bit, but I think we're getting close to this. Yeah, we are. So it talks about how blockchain requests may compromise a request to perform cross-layer transaction XLT between first blockchain of the plurality of blockchains and second blockchain of the plurality of blockchains, and wherein a request to perform XLT comprises the data identifier. But it gets into the whole thing of Overledger here in a second. I apologize. Of course, they have these drawings. Give me a second. And how the figures show how this all works together. Give me a second. Yeah, this is like a weird printout, if you will. Oh, this part right here. Figure 1 says 2 DLTs, a first DLT, a second DLT are represented as being part of DLT layer, although it would be appreciated that and this is the far right of the screen, if you're wondering where I'm at, I can't really highlight it. Apologize, but it says, yeah, it says being part of the DLT layer, although it will be appreciated that the Overledger communications layer may be capable of interfacing with any number of different DLTs. So the demo that we showed on video confirmed it. Now this is the patent that confirms it. So I'll restate this again. Overledger communications layer may be capable of interfacing with any number of different DLTs. For example, Bitcoin, Ethereum, own particular protocol for blockchain operations, such as reading data from a blockchain, writing data to a blockchain, and or transferring ownership of data from one entity to another entity on the same blockchain or to a different blockchain. A cross-ledger transaction, different blockchains may also, I should say, may allow any one or more of read, write, and transfer operations to be performed on the blockchain, depending on that purpose that the blockchain has been configured to perform. The Overledger communications layer comprises the different methods by which the blockchain operations may be performed on the first DLT, and on the second DLT, for example, the first DLT may be Bitcoin, which has a particular protocol for new transactions to be written to its blockchain. The particular protocol of Bitcoin will be, or should I say, will be well understood by a skilled person, but briefly, it may compromise such information as the public key of the payee, such as the wallet of the payee, as an amount to be transferred to the payee at a hash of the earlier transaction in which the payee obtained the Bitcoin now being transferred, and a signature payee, which is the payee's private key. The protocol defines the allowable format in which all these items basically come together, right? It's a lot of details, but what I'm trying to point out to you in regards to all that, a little bit of the nerd talk, was it confirms that this whole thing of this being speculative and supposedly being blockchain agnostic and interoperable with everything literally shows it all in this patent if you're willing to take the time to read it. Draw your attention a little bit more to the right side of the screen. Also talks about this. It says specifically, in the particular example represented in figure 2, the application is shown to be capable of interacting with both the first DLT network and the second DLT network, although we appreciate that the application developer may alternatively utilize the Overledger SDK as a software development kit to configure the application to interact with only the first DLT network or only the second DLT network. In particular, as part of the development of the application developer may develop a programming interface to handle communications between Overledger communications layer and the applicational functional layer. Now, the point is, Gilbert Verdian mentioned this in some presentations. I don't know if some of you guys remember some of that. Going further down on this, hold on a second. I mean, there's a lot, obviously, to get into. I'm not going to get into all of this. But basically, hold on. Yes, this part. It states that, basically speaking, the mere change for particular functions and commands that are functional in an application layer. Talks about, for instance, the support for the Overledger SDK. Overledger SDK may be changed, and the service offering developer may consequently change the BPI if necessary. As a result, most client application developers should only need to change particular BPI functions and commands at the functional application layer of the client application. Those aspects, right, to change that layer. Okay, what does that mean in layman's terms? It means, it pounds home everything that Gilbert Verdian mentioned, in which you could come into this. You don't need another blockchain to recreate everything. And if anything, in regards to the dApps, it's only 3 lines of code. That basically explains that, but not in Greek. All right, hold on a second. There's a little bit more I want to get into this. Talks about a functioning layer and the Overledger communications layers. Talks about this whole part of how each one is different with applications. But the point is, it's just a full breakdown of how it all comes together and how it's all explained. References Bitcoin, Ethereum, Ripple XRP, because you got to keep in mind, in the demo, it mentions some of this stuff, right? So I'm going to take you out of this because I don't know, some guys might get bored with some of this, I have to admit. And give me stop share on that one. And let me get you back to where we need to be. So let's pull this back up. Let's take you over to here. And this is new for the most part. All right. So it says basically straight from the Quant Network site yesterday, guarding your core, source code auditing by Celine Justice. That's how you pronounce it. I don't know. Justice. 2 things tagged here: smart audit from Quant, smart contract audits. This lady, Celine Justice, is a senior product marketing manager. She says, quote, your smart contracts can either fulfill their intended purpose or present vulnerable spots for malicious hackers to explore. Look what's also posted here. It says, whether your intent is to launch your smart contracts onto public-private chains, starting with the proper foundation will safeguard your assets. And just as in traditional systems, cybersecurity plays a vital role in this, but even more so in the blockchain world, where your code quality and resilience can dictate the future of your portfolio. And you may be thinking, why am I sharing this? Well, for one, it's new, but keep in mind the recent patent that has been confirmed. Inventor Gilbert Verdian, Quant Network all the way, mentioned multiple times, and then now enter this whole thing of what? Smart contracts? What do we also know with Sorbonne, with Stellar? Right, premier smart contract platform. But what about one with Overledger, in which you can just make smart contracts on every single particular, blockchain DLT solution out there? And if anything, they have a patent to make it happen. When we talk about interoperability, when we talk about API everything, it's Quant all the way. So don't get me wrong, that's not me fudding, of course, Stellar. I love Stellar. I like being diversified, but I also recognize the God token, if you will, which is Quant. All right? Yeah, I think BSV is up there too. But in 2022 alone, look at what it says, almost $4 billion in cryptocurrency was stolen. Much of that was due to smart contract exploits. And we pointed this out before, that with Quant Network, they got this whole thing of Quant Authorized, right? This is a smart contract audit for every smart contract out there, basically. So the way I look at it is, there's for instance, ERC20, then there's for instance ERC 721 with NFTs and so on. Quant is able to blanket the security audits of everything out there, and also NFTs. You know what I mean? So it's that was so significant. But now, having this extended safeguard, if you will, with this is game changer. You got to listen a little bit more about this. Q3 of 2023, 700 million was lost to hacking attacks. While the reasons for these losses vary from key mismanagement to social engineering, one of the most preventable is smart contract coding errors. True. Wouldn't you like to have something, if you're a dev, that will go through and just simply, like with the power of like AI and some other things, go in and clean up the mess? Right. Of course. At Quant, they rely on a team of experts, engineers who have experience working on some of the world's most complex projects. We still subject our smart contracts to external auditing to verify and improve the security of our smart tokens. And they're trying to point out that Quant is the answer for that, to kind of, clear up some of the mess. Now, I'm not going to just leave you with just this, but what I want to share with you is this over here, because it's all about timing. So this comes from this link here, ecb.europa.eu, and I'm going to drop this into the chat for a second. But what's significant is some of the key things here, and I'm not going to read everything from here. But you know how we talked about Target2, right? T2. Well, look at this. It says many DLT platforms include the possibility to program smart contracts. Once again, another connection. Smart contracts are automatable, contractual arrangements embedded into computer software, which the latter can validate, execute, and record automatically. We know that as soon as a certain predefined condition have been met, based on information from the distributed ledger itself or a predefined external source. The use of such smart contracts could make processes more seamless depending on the concrete setup. But the part about being more seamless, or as Gilbert Verdian has always mentioned, also future-proof. Think about it. Quant Authorize makes everything, as Verdian has mentioned, future-proof. Getting more into this, it says, depending on the concrete setup of the infrastructure and the smart contracts themselves, for example, frictions could arise due to the need to retrieve information from an external source or to execute transactions across multiple DLT or non-DLT. Now here's some of that juicy stuff. Notice in the patent that we explained, and we could get into all of it because we'd be here for probably like 10 hours. No one's going to be here for 10 hours. What was one of the main things that I mentioned that it showed twice in the patent? Talked about two particular DLTs, right? Remember that? Once again, to execute transactions across multiple DLT or non-DLT platforms that cannot operate or interoperate smoothly. About having an application layer that allows full interoperability. Why? Because it's blockchain agnostic. As we know a little bit more about this, Quant has this whole thing with the Bank of England, Bank of International Settlements when it comes to wholesale CBDCs. Well, straight from this site that puts a lot of focus on Target2, market experiences with DLT for wholesale financial transactions. Like it says, in recent years, a number of market participants in the financial sector have been increasingly exploring opportunities of DLTs to generate new business models and to improve the functioning of the market process. What platform is improving these particular things of, generating new business models to improve functioning in the market process, and if anything, saving companies money? Through what? The Overledger, right? Gilbert Verdian has been interviewed time and time again talking about this. Now, Target2 and the Eurosystem, like it also pointed out here, gathered information on relevant market initiatives from market stakeholders and their associations. National central banks of the Euro system have provided further information on market and public sector initiatives related to the use of new tech such as DLT and wholesale payments and securities settlement. Right. Who is that? Once again, we re-verify this because the BIS chose Quant. Bank of England chose Quant. LackChain chose Quant. Recent thing that's not official, but you better believe it if you see Andrew Carrier there, right? Quant. So The bottom line is this. I'm going to show you just a tad bit more. Again, from this europa.eu. And it says about a second option. Now, just hear me out. The second option would be to offer a Eurosystem DLT platform for Euro central bank money settlement, combined with a technical interface between that platform and market DLT platforms. Back to the patent. The patent confirms everything that's listed on this site. Literally. Says this will be conceptually very different to the first option. Again, the securities leg was settle on the market DLT platform, cash a leg in a Eurosystem infrastructure. The key difference is that in this case, that the Eurosystem infrastructure would be based on DLT. This type of solution is referred to as a full DLT interoperability solution. My God, I wonder what that would be, right? So there's a lot to it that's here. I'll close on this before I give you guys my little extra bonus research conclusion. A same platform settlement solution, such as the integration of integration and distribution solutions described above, are similar to the concept of what a unified ledger. Boom. There you go again. Proposed by who? The BIS. It just pounds it home every single time you look more into it. As of course, 2023 annual economic report. A unified ledger, as researched and theoretically described by the BIS, various types of assets, central bank money, commercial bank money, and other assets represented in the form of programmable tokens to enable seamless automation and integration of complex transactions. Referenced again from that patent that has now been confirmed. And instead of saying, oh, it's all speculative, we don't know if this connects to Quant, the inventor, first one labeled on the list, is Gilbert Verdian, and at least 6 times mentioned Quant Network, and even has a few other people that are part of the team. More about governance platforms. I'm not going to get into all that, but what I will get into is my key takeaway about why this is so significant for you as a Quant holder. And hear me out. So bottom line is this Eurosystem, the DLT platform, basically speaking, for Euro central bank money settlement or instant settlement, right? Some people say it's just all Ripple XRP all the way. I love Ripple XRP. I love Stellar. Don't get me wrong, guys, but I want to be diversified. I also think Quant is a big, huge player as part of the mix that just most people dismiss. I do not know why. But you got to keep in mind, with this Euro central bank money settlement combined with a technical interface, what technical interface would that be? To market DLT platforms could be significant for Quant Network and, of course, our holders, as in you and me, for several different reasons and ways. And if anything, we'll get into 2 key things in regards to what? Increased market relevance. So for one, it's not a potential for interoperability anymore. We've already been there. We've already done that. We talked about that till we're blue in the face for 2 years or more. Quant Network itself is actively involved in developing, of course, interoperability solutions for DLT platforms, and it will continuously do that. If it's its technology is chosen or compatible with a technical interface, they're going to be there like a fat kid on cake, as I always would say. They're going to gain significant market adoption and relevance within the European financial landscape. That's what's going to stand out for them. But we know they're going to take it to the United States. How do we know that? Did you forget about Project Hamilton? That was confirmed a while back. And some of the other ones, Icebreaker and so on. Doing work with the New York Federal Reserve a while back, MIT. So they already worked with the US government. And we did get confirmation, the whole thing with Quant Network, which was in the past speculative, and we found out that to be a real thing. Enhanced value proposition is another thing to keep in mind about this. Because by facilitating the interaction between, just like we've been talking about, the Euro system, especially with Target2 and so on, in that platform for market DLTs, Quant Network itself could very well strengthen its value. Because a lot of people are like, man, I want to see this thing, pop off to, 10,000 plus. Yeah, I'm with you, right? On a minimum. We got way higher than that. Most of us do. But it could very well strengthen its value proposition for financial institutions and market participants looking to do what? Leverage DLT for, yes, cross-border settlements and other financial transactions. Because if anything, what about being able to just quickly take your particular token or coin, whatever, and through Overledger, just hop to the XRPL. Remember that demo shows that you can do that with QNT? All right. Don't want to talk your ear off about all the specifics, but there is a couple more I want to get into. You got to keep in mind, there's going to be some more potential integration if anything, like there wasn't enough already. Overledger's tech. Quant Network's Overledger platform, as we know, is designed to bridge the gap between different DLTs and, of course, the traditional networks. Just like, for instance, Stellar, the on and off ramps between, the traditional financial sectors of the world and the new gigs. Quant Network also has this whole thing of existing capabilities that could potentially fit well with its technical interface, as in the Quant Overledger itself, and those specific requirements of the Eurosystem platform. So those requirements, by having these key patents, even in the US, is going to set Quant up now for the future, because they already got this thing going on with Europe and even Latin America. To see that patent for US pounds it home. It's going to position Quant as a strong contender for full-fledged integration. I would agree with that. Now, what about streamlined DLT adoption? Because we want to see more adoption we can see this God token, like for some of us, shout out to Sobo, get us like a nice cabin out in the middle of the woods or something like that, and not have any neighbors for a few miles or something. That sounds cool. So streamlined DLT adoption, the technical interface could act as a gateway, listen to this, for market DLT platforms to access the Eurosystem settlement system. Market DLT platforms? So you have this thing that's really like the God token, if you will. Overledger connects through everything. And then now, when we talk about, you won't even know it's connected to Quant, a cryptosmith would say, the plumbing. It all starts coming in, but we're not to the point of full-fledged, adoption yet. It's kind of like, when people talk about, do you have the framework? Do you have the groundwork laid out? Yeah, we do. But what about with Quant, where it's like, instead of just having a few houses built, you have a whole entire, community built, or a whole city built, right, from the ground up. You better believe it's going to benefit the Quant network directly through increased demand for just that, Overledger itself, and its technology, and, of course, its services. Now, with that said, there is going to be more partnerships and collaborations, and you're also going to see other ones out there come out of the woodwork with support for Quant. And big up to, Mr. What's his name? Rashid, I can never pronounce it right, from Nexera Alliance Block, because in the past, you see these guys come in the woodwork confirming some things of the past that, yeah, we're using Quant. So there is going to be more collaboration with this Eurosystem, and the involvement in this project could, of course, provide Quant Network with the opportunity to build strong relationships with other participants in the Eurosystem, not just T2. Keep in mind, this could also lead to other collaborations that can further advance more DLT adoption. If Quant is at the forefront all the way, well, you could add 2 and 2 together. All right. A couple things I want to note for you guys. Yes, the Eurosystem project itself is still in its early stages. And yes, there's specific technical requirements in regards to these potential future partners that have been finalized. No kidding. But other DLT providers and technologies are also likely to be considered for this specific project moving forward. And that sounds so bullish to me, because every single time we have showed you guys the chart for ISO 222 and the deadlines, what is one of the key things that's mentioned is Target2. And also keep in mind how many people live in Europe. And also keep in mind, the United States is going to come to the big show at the end in November 2025. So did Quant, behind the scenes, basically prepared themselves for these final deadlines? In my own humble opinion, I think the answer is yes.